Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here and welcome back to Dauntless. It's been quite a few months since my last video on this game. I first covered it shortly after it was announced and took an immediate interest in it, given that it falls within the same space or genre as Monster Hunter, one of my all-time favourite game series. And since then, I've followed it pretty closely, keeping an eye on all the news, content updates and just in general, how it's shaping up. The game is set to launch later this year, with a Founders Alpha kicking off in a few weeks, August 18th. And ahead of that, Phoenix Labs, the guys behind Dauntless, were kind enough to give me near unlimited access to the alpha build, to give me a chance to really sink my teeth into it, explore what the game has to offer, provide feedback, and most importantly, record plenty of gameplay so that I can share those thoughts with you guys. And in this video, we're going to be talking primarily about the combat, how the game plays, how it feels, how it's shaping up, and ultimately, whether this is something I think you guys will be interested in checking out. So if you do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Be sure to comment down below, let me know if you guys are looking forward to checking this out, and if you have any questions, then also drop them down below. Now, to begin with, before we dive into the meat of the video, so I can make sure that we're all on the same page, let's start with what exactly is Dauntless. Dauntless is an upcoming free-to-play co-op action RPG where, in a similar vein to Monster Hunter or other games in that space, you fight giant beasts, in this case called behemoths, and you then use the parts gathered from those behemoths to forge more powerful weapons and craft more powerful armor, and then with that new gear equipped, you guessed it, you then go off and fight even more powerful behemoths and repeat the cycle. So if you like a challenge and you like grinding for loot, then you're probably going to want to pay attention. In this game, your quote-unquote hunter is referred to as a slayer. You have 4 weapons to choose from, each of which provide a drastically different gameplay experience, and we'll explore those shortly, plus there will be more weapons added further down the line. The game can also be played with up to 3 other players to form a team of 4, and together you can go off and slay behemoths side by side, but similarly, if you are more the lone wolf type, then you can go it alone. In fact, while I have had the opportunity to play Dauntless in co-op, all my alpha playtime has been solo, since the time zones made it a little tricky to pair up with anyone else. So I just did it the old-fashioned way and got the job done, which is pretty handy for any of you guys wondering what it's like as a solo player. So in short, if like me, you're a fan of Monster Hunter or other games within that space, Tolkien, God Eater, heck even something like Dark Souls, which is admittedly a little different but does too share certain similarities, if any of these games resonate with you, then Dauntless might just have something for you. But enough with the preamble, let's actually dive in and start talking about the game itself. Combat is the main focus here. We'll touch on a few other topics along the way, but ultimately, in a game like this, where you're going to be fighting and slaying behemoths over and over again to farm parts needed to make your gear, it is incredibly important that combat feels good. I mean, if it was rubbish, then the excitement of the fight wouldn't be there, that would then make the grind for loot a chore, and you would then just put the game down. Thankfully, the combat in Dauntless is in a very good place already. It is, however, worth calling out that this is still an alpha. There is placeholder stuff that is work in progress, stuff that we're not supposed to test yet simply because it isn't finished, and we're far enough away from launch whereby any feedback given can still have a genuine positive impact on the game. And to that point right there, the fact that feedback can heavily impact the player experience is evident on the combat front. See, I actually had a chance to play Dauntless a good while ago when they took the game to PAX South. I wasn't actually there, but I had a chance to play the build remotely, and at the time, what we were experiencing was much earlier on in development. The core flow was there, the weapons were in place, the moves were in place, in fact everything you needed to complete an end-to-end hunt was there, so the player experience was solid. But at the time, combat was definitely still being worked on. Back then, the feel of the weapons wasn't quite right. They didn't have the feeling of weight you'd expect when swinging something like a hammer, or charging up a hefty axe hit, or even quickly swinging a light and nimble sword. Pair that with the sounds that at the time were also still work in progress and didn't provide that sort of meaty audio feedback you'd expect, and you were left with an experience that was fun and had great potential, but definitely still had a way to go. Well, fast forward to today, or this past week, where I've been sinking a good number of hours into the alpha build, and let me tell you, all the feedback and concerns back then have been wholeheartedly addressed. The combat now feels great. Each of the 4 weapons feels different and feels how you'd expect it to. If you're wielding the bigger, hefty and slow hammer, when you attack the behemoths, you have that sense of weight that comes with a weapon of that type. Charging up a big axe hit and landing it feels and sounds satisfying. Swinging the chain blades in a fast-paced flurry combo makes you feel like some sort of kung fu master. And even the more modest nimble sword, when powered up, taking full advantage of the weapon's potential, feels great. So in short, the experience and the feedback that is entirely necessary to make slaying behemoths over and over again fun is here. But what about the actual combat itself? How in-depth is it? How easy is it to pick up? Well, with these types of games, there's really two main ways to approach things. You either go down the Monster Hunter route, where you have a wide range of weapons, each of which has a varying number of combos for you to learn and master, some weapons more complex than others, or alternatively you go, say, the Dark Souls route, also offering a wide range of weapons, but combat is much more streamlined, more basic, but also more deliberate. Games like that are much more about taking your basic understanding of the weapon that you're using and then mastering when and how you should use it. And that latter route is the path Dauntless chose. Combat in Dauntless, no matter what weapon you choose, is much more simple. Easy to pick up, but hard to master is the phrase that you're looking for here. If you look at the menu for any weapon, you'll have your basic attacks on X and Y, or left and right mouse if you're playing keyboard and mouse. These can then be chained together to form a few basic combos, all of which are listed in the menu. Unlike games like Monster Hunter, where you're given the basics, but you then later discover there are a ton more combos hidden amongst various button inputs, in Dauntless, what you see is what you get. But don't take that the wrong way, it's not a bad thing, not in the slightest. This sort of approach is what makes games like Super Smash Bros., Marvel vs. Capcom, or even the upcoming, say, Dragon Ball FighterZ so good. Yes, they're fighting games, but the point is, you pick up the controller, and within a couple of minutes, you know what you're doing. But of course, with extended playtime, there is a whole lot more to master. You're not weighed down with a 10-page move list, you're not sitting there worrying about whether your chosen combo is the most optimal, whether it's outputting the best possible DPS. You know that within your limited array of moves, provided that you're in the action and attacking, you're generally speaking doing a good job. That being said, there are of course subtleties to each weapon, things that you want to know, and these are things that I do actually plan to cover very soon in a series of weapon tutorials. Some moves do more damage than others, some moves have specific purposes, for example the sword's fast flurry attack. This isn't a damage dealing move, the damage output is pretty low, but it's incredible at building meter. The chain blades, they have a resource that allows you to pull yourself in and throw yourself out of combat. This resource is built during combat, but with mastery of the weapon, you learn that there are also ways to take advantage of these moves without consuming your resource. For weapons like the axe, there's the surface level charge attacks, which seem cool, do a lot of damage, but then there's the underlying buff system, which you can work towards to do some massive damage. So as you can see, with each weapon, you may have just a handful of moves or combos for you to choose from, but only through extended playtime do you truly begin to master the weapon and really understand what it has to offer. In fact, this very system is also what makes experimenting with other weapons so easy. Even if you spend hours and hours mastering one weapon, if you then suddenly decide that you want to mix things up and just dive in with something new, it won't be long before you know what you're doing with the other weapons, and that then helps keep things fresh. So again, to reiterate, the combat model is definitely, without a doubt, a case of easy to pick up, hard to master. But in a game like this, combat from your character is of course only half the battle. It's what you're fighting against that provides the challenge, the behemoths. I'm not entirely sure at this stage how many they plan to launch with, but during the alpha I had a chance to fight against a good 5 or 6 different types. They also come in different forms. Early on you fight what are called the beta versions. These are basically the beginner forms of the behemoths and they behave similar to their alpha versions, the main difference being that they don't enter the enraged state. When a behemoth becomes enraged, it begins to behave very differently, it's considerably more aggressive and more dangerous, so that in itself is actually a really clever way to introduce people to the fight. You battle the baby version, essentially, and then once you've proven that you're able to take it down, you then fight the real thing. But each behemoth is drastically different from the last. They're bright, colourful and varied in design, but don't let the colourful nature fool you. They're also pretty lethal if you don't know what you're doing. Much like any other game in this genre, without a health bar to monitor, you're reliant on the creature's tells, so you have to look for things like when it slows down, it flees, or the usual stuff, and combat is then about studying the behemoth, learning its tells, and reacting to them. Some are easier than others, so when you start out, the Nasher for example, very clearly telegraphs its moves, so it's incredibly easy to read, and quite frankly, if you're getting hit by it, then you're probably just not paying attention. Meanwhile, something a little more fierce, like Drask, the tells on that are a little bit more subtle, and the beast is much bigger, so you either learn to fight with caution, or very quickly learn to master the iframes on your rolls or your dashes. It's also worth mentioning that in the grand scheme of things, I'm still super early in the game, so while I'm able to begin to see where the challenge lies, and how some of these behemoths will present rather difficult situations, there's still so much more for me to discover, and the true challenge still awaits. If I were to use Monster Hunter as a comparison point, I'm still fighting in low rank. I've still got high rank to go. But comparisons aside, I genuinely am having a blast playing Dauntless, and it's actually really refreshing to see another game in this genre. And given that it will be free to play when it launches later this year, there's really no reason to not check it out. Of course, if you're still on the fence, then when the embargo lifts for the alpha later this month, I'll be streaming it, so I'll give you guys a good chance to see it in action and see what the game has to offer. Plus, as mentioned, I'm planning on doing a series of weapon tutorials to speak a little more in depth about the 4 weapons, so do keep it locked for those. But for the time being, hope you guys enjoyed the video and look at how the game is shaping up. If you did, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Of course, if you have any questions, ask away. And thanks very much for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.